Now, that earlier coffee table that we showed you in the animation was very much an idealized sketch. In fact, what that would end up looking like, if we printed it the way we've shown you, would have been this. At the tops, as you can see, all lumpy, you can see where supports have been fastened on. And I can show you why, if we just have a look at the slicing software that I used. What we've got here is the build plate at the top, and we're going to build the table downwards. So we've got the first raft being developed. As we come down, here are the supports, and then after the supports, we start to produce the tabletop. But imagine now that that's coming down into the vat, through the resin, onto the FEP. It's then exposed, and as you pull it off, that very thin surface at the end of those supports is going to be distorted. And so we're going to get some bending on that. So what we have to do then is not build it level to the build plate. What we should do is build it at an angle. So just taking some of these things off, let's remove all that support. We've now got our table hovering above the build plate. I've turned it over because it makes more sense to do it this way. And what I'm going to do first of all is go into the controls, and over here I've got some adjustment controls that'll move it horizontally and vertically. This one allows us to spin it. This control here allows you to alter the scale, and this one produces a mirror image. So the one we're after is this, and as you can see, as soon as we come up with that screw, we can now tilt this by getting hold of the red circle there. I can tilt that at about 30 degrees. I'll also tilt it forward to back by another 30 degrees or so. Now, if you look at the actual area we've got, just pull down here through the slicing thing, you can see that the only part of it that's being exposed is a very small area. And compared with the built plate, the raft that we've produced already, then that's quite small. That isn't going to get distorted. And you can build up all the way through. And again, at each stage, as each level, each layer is going to be very thin and a very small area compared with the raft. Okay then, so that's how we're going to go with that. Let's now start putting supports on. Reduce it in size a bit, see what we're doing. Now there's several ways of doing this. First of all, the Z height. This is the height that the item is actually above the build plate. So we could bring it right down or take it right up just by clicking on the arrows. It needs about 5 millimeters to get sufficient distance between the raft and the item that you're printing. Otherwise you get all sorts of distortions creeping in. We've got it set to medium supports, and I tend on this is Chitterbox software, tend to use it. Medium seems to be a pretty good standard for what I'm doing. And just by going down here onto platform, click on there, and you'll get an awful lot of supports generated. Probably more than you need, to be honest. But that's one way of doing it. You could simply export that, slice it, export it, and print it off, and it would look all right. You've just got an awful lot of supports, some unnecessary ones. We can look more scientifically at that by removing all of them and going down here to the auto support facility. Minimum support length 5 millimeters. It's fair enough because we've got the height at 5.5. The next significant figure is the density. If I reduce that from 100% to 1% and then produce a platform, you'll see we still get quite a few supports in there, but nothing like as many. If we don't do any of that at all, so we remove all those, you can actually put your own in. So these here allow you to add a support, remove a support, or edit a support. Before we slice it, consider the settings for the print. Now my printer is an Elegoo Mars. That's the machine specification. No need to change any of that. The resin spec is normal resin type, resin grey. It's about £35 a litre. The reason you need that is it'll work out how much the print's costing you. And then the print, I'm going to print this at 0.01 of a millimetre. That's 10 microns thick. Bottom layer count, 6 layers. That needs to be, that bottom layer really needs to be well etched into the plate. You don't want that shifting. So you have a number of layers there, probably 6, and the exposure time is quite long. I usually use about a minute, 60 seconds. Again, it depends on how much weight that has to bear. But that's about right, I think. And the normal exposure time for all the other layers, instead of the base, is 6 seconds. It doesn't need to be that long because we're only doing 10 microns thickness. If we were doing 100 microns, yes, you'd need to increase the exposure time to make sure that all the resin in that gap is exposed. So having done the settings, and before we slice it, let's just think what we've got here. That section in the center is solid resin at the moment. Now, it's going to cost a bit. You don't want to waste resin by printing on that. So what you could do is hollow it. And up here, we've got open file, save file, screen capture recording, forget that, undo, redo, clone the current model. So if you just did that, you just get another one. Get rid of that. Auto layout, self-explanatory, hollow. Now if you click hollow, you can set the wall thickness to 1.2, anything you want, but to 1.2 millimeters in here. With a fairly rough precision. I don't really care what the quality of the hollow is because I'm not going to see it. And then click start. What it'll do now is scan through and find areas you can see here where it's starting to open up and hollow out the model. A little bit of a hole going straight through there, and now we're into the base. You can see there that's being hollowed out. So hollowing the model, it won't obviously hollow the supports. Hollowing the model is a useful thing to do if you don't want it to be load bearing in any way, and certainly this table isn't going to carry much load. We've got a hole in here now, but as the table prints, that hole could fill up with resin and then be sealed when we get to the end of the print. So what we'll end up is with some liquid resin in there that hasn't been exposed. Well, you don't want that because that liquid resin in time will expand. So there's another facility on here called dig hole. You can decide the shape of the hole, the size of the hole, and the depth of the hole. You can even keep the hole if you want, so it throws out what it's taken out onto here, so you can use it to put it back in the hole if you need. We'll not bother with that. We don't want the hole. I can just fill it in with filler. So if we're going to add a hole, we'll put one there. I don't know if you can see in there, but you can now see into the table, into the base. And if we go underneath, try and guess the best place for another one, and that's going to be dig a hole, add a hole, about there. That's it. Suppose you can actually just see through there, that's nice. So we've now got a hole all the way through, so we've got drainage of any liquid resin that might get stuck inside the model. Okay, now we've done that, we can now slice the model. It takes quite a while to do the slicing. It's quite a complex procedure. And when it's done the slicing, it will show you what the slicing has done and come up with a very interesting pair of images. If we use this scan bar, take it down to the bottom, makes more sense. So as you're going up here, you can see two things. You can see the image as it will be portrayed on the LED screen, and you can also see what level you're at on the print itself. So as we come up here, we can see supports and then the table starting to form. The thing to look out for here is just at that moment where the table starts to form, there's got to be something supporting it. If it didn't have anything supporting it, it would print that and then it would just drop off. There's nothing to support that end of the table. So that's why that we put the supports at the lowest point. Well, that is the lowest point, supports there, and so we can grow from there. And you can see on the left there how it's growing out and being supported as it builds up. Now we're starting to see a little bit of the hollowing. gets narrower for the leg, and then up to the top. So you just see the edge of the hole there, up to the top of the print. So that's ready to go. And so then you can save it. You'll notice here on the right that it's giving us the resin type, the volume it's printing, its weight, not going to be very heavy at 4.4 grams, the price, so it's used the price of the resin to work out how much resin I'm using and the cost. So this whole table is going to cost a whole 14 pence. But it's going to take 9 hours, 37 minutes, 26 seconds to print. I'm not worried about that. I just set it going overnight. Then I can save that file, and it will actually save it as a CBD DLP file, which is a Chitterbox slicer file. Save it wherever I want, and then put it on, also copy that onto the memory stick, and then from the memory stick it goes into the printer, and we can just sit back and watch it go.